Saffron Burrows, congratulations to you and the cast and crew of Mozart in the Jungle, having just been nominated a few weeks ago for a Golden Globe for Best TV Comedy Series. That must have been a huge thrill for you.
Thank you. It was very lovely. Yeah, it was a lovely surprise. There's such brilliant comedies in that category. And, you know, I think anyone who's sort of streaming online as opposed to sort of being on the traditional television set is thrilled when people sit up and notice a show and watch it. So it was really lovely.
And tell us about that morning of the announcement. How did you find out about it? Were you even expecting it to happen?
I really wasn't expecting it. I was in New York and we were doing press for the show, and I woke up in my hotel pretty late because it's New York.
Yeah.
I was, you know, like took advantage of, you know, not being around my toddler for a while. And I had a text message and I was terribly surprised, not because I don't love the show, but just because there's so much good stuff out there. And as I said, it's just thrilling to think that people have watched it and are enjoying it. So I think it's just a lovely affirmation of something for us all.
Yeah, I think the beauty of it, because I got into the show a few months ago and honestly wasn't expecting much to come out of it in terms of the Globes. It's so hard to get nominated these days. There's like a billion TV shows on the air and streaming daily. It's so hard to break through the noise, but I was really happy because it puts a show like this, a smaller show, on the map. And so then people are thinking, oh, what's this? Let's why don't we stream it tonight and check it out? And then obviously that grows your audience and fan base. What do you think it means? Do you agree that awards recognition is vital for a show like this one to be recognized and to kind of grow its audience?
I think Amazon and I imagine the other streaming platforms are thrilled when something's critically acknowledged, just because I think that's the sort of content that they're interested in making. You know, stuff that people are passionately watching rather than sort of lazily watching or passively watching. So I think when something's critically acknowledged, it's just, you know, it's really lovely for everyone involved. And obviously they've attracted talent in lots of the projects they're making who are traditionally from other mediums, from film and theatre, and not necessarily from this world. So I think it's terrific, and perhaps, you know, one hopes it will just draw a little attention to the show and have a few more people watch it.
Yeah, so you play Cynthia on the show. For new viewers, why don't you tell us your take on Cynthia?
Cynthia is a cellist. She's a very spontaneous woman in our show. She's when we meet Cynthia in the first episode, in the pilot, she sort of talks to Haley, Lola Kirk's character, takes her under her wing. And I think she sees something of herself as the seasons progress. She sees something of herself in her dynamic, in Lola Kirk's character's dynamic with the people around her. You know, Cynthia's come up in this industry, which has been tough in many regards. I spoke to one or two women who were in the New York Phil, and one woman in particular who joined the New York Phil in the 70s, and said at the time, I think she was the second woman to join that orchestra, and there was no dressing room for women. They had to change in the loo because there was a male dressing room, and that was the dressing room, you know. So it was a very gender-ridden world in recent years. And so I think she's had to sort of fight quite a bit to get to where she is, and has also had great joy in this musical profession, and has no apparent attachments on the marital front. So she's involved for a long, long time. She's involved with Malcolm McDowell's character. I'd say over 20 years from when she was very young in the orchestra. They began some sort of liaison and have real feelings for each other. And then you'll see when season 2 is upon us today, there's someone new that turns up who catches her interest. But it's a lovely character to play because she's so free, and I think she lives without categorization. She sort of lives from her heart and lives rather passionately and has strong opinions about things. And then she's thrust into this position with the union, with the musicians union, where she's asked to sort of take a lead to some degree. And you'll see a lot of tussle there between the union and the management of the orchestra and what occurs between them, which I'm thrilled to play because my background is, my family. I come from a strong union family in England, so that's a really interesting part of what I'm being offered to play.
Yeah, when I started to cotton on to that storyline, I immediately thought that there was some parallels with your own background, which must be really cool because obviously you're not Cynthia and there are a lot of differences between you. But I would imagine that playing someone like her, for example, when I first started watching the show, I was really taken with her because she was so kind to Hayley. And she was like that big sister that a lot of other people have said in other articles and reviews of the show. And she seems so nice, even though she didn't have to be nice. She's very seasoned. She's very classy. She didn't have to be nice to Hayley, and yet she took her under her wing. And in a sense, the audience kind of goes along not only with Hayley but with someone like Cynthia, who is so accessible. How difficult do you think it is, though, to play someone like her? Because she is very mysterious. There's still a lot about her we don't really know. Do you have a lot more information about her than what we're seeing on the screen, or are you still learning about her too?
That's a good question. There's a degree of mystery that I haven't yet unraveled. But of course, when you're playing someone, you figure out all the life you think that happened to them before this moment. And so some of that has been information given to me by the creators of the show, and some of that has been my own imagination. And some of that's my own life. So it's a kind of a triumvirate of experiences, I think, between things I discuss with our writers and what I know about the sort of life that Cynthia's led internationally, which has involved a lot of being in exile from her home and a lot of travel and a lot of unusual circumstances, which bring joy and also a degree of loneliness or discomfort. So in some ways I've had things happen in my life earlier on because I've been traveling for so long that I can sort of relate to with her. And then some is just sort of a bit of mystery, which I'm enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely. You can discover her.
The joy of this episodic work is that obviously we're all finding out moments about ourselves as the scripts are handed to us, and some of which we're told ahead of time, and some of which the writers themselves don't perhaps know until a later moment. So that's really enjoyable to play.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I was thinking the key, obviously, to this show is the music. It plays such a massive part of the show. It's like a character in itself. Are you a musical person, or if not, what did you do to immerse yourself in that scene or in that world? Because it is so separate to what many of us would know and understand.
Yes, I wasn't raised with a classical music background at all. I was raised with a love of music, but whether it was the hip hop that I loved as a teenager and the sort of more Bob Dylan-y, Cat Stevens-y world of my parents, and my dad loved Miles Davis and a lot of really interesting jazz music my dad played. But I wasn't really raised with a classical input so much, and so it's been really fun and enjoyable discovering the layers of that world. And I'm just dipping my toes in still now with season 2. I've been lucky enough to have kind of a sessions, I suppose you'd call them, rehearsals or workshops with the New York Phil, with Carter Bray, who's the principal cellist there. And we had one lesson where I showed up with my little practice cello at the stage door of the Lincoln Center, and he just took me into this room where they rehearse, and we basically had a sort of flamenco session where we barely touched the cello and did a lot of stamping and clapping. And I came away thinking, what was that? But it's been to kind of dip my toes in. And then every week we're given a piece to learn that we hope we can master 90 seconds of this Mahler or Tchaikovsky, that, we have maybe 6 or 7 days to try and crack this little piece. So I've become quite good at very short excerpts.
So you're actually playing the cello. All of you are playing your instruments, right? Is that true?
Sitting behind me. I'm playing the cello because I think I couldn't really not play it. I mean, first of all, it's beautiful to play, but secondly, it would be a very hard thing to pretend to play, because you know, the bowing and the strings they're so evident. So I'm playing very small pieces of those great works.
Yeah. Wow. Do you, what do you think about this scene though? This particular scene of like, this is what the show's about. It's about the New York Orchestra and about the musicians and their lives and their day-to-day battles. Is it, because it's so unusual, it's such an unusual theme for a show. Did you have to do any research? Were you familiar with the source material perhaps?
I did have to do some research into the sort of the particular way an orchestra works. Absolutely, the dynamics between people, on a pragmatic front, the level of pay structure and how that works, and how the structure of management works, and then also just the sort of romantic aspect of it. The idea that you know, that Carter Bray at the New York Phil said, "Saffron, all of life is here. People join here after college, they fall in love here, they have babies, and they tend to stay here until they retire. This is their last stop, often because it's such a beautiful job to have." So you have all of life and the breadth and depth of that, and the joys of that, and the lows of that. And you know, I've heard of circumstances where there's a married couple in an orchestra who then divorce, but they want to keep on playing. So they, you know, perhaps are stuck in a position 3 chairs from someone they used to live with for years. And so there's such a rich mine of dynamics to explore for our show, I think, between you know, great passions and romances, and then sort of bitternesses and rivalries and everything in between. But I think there's a warm-heartedness to this that I really like. The way they've written my character Cynthia, the affection I have for Lola Kirk's character, I think is very unusual in a piece of writing. And so often you would just pit the women against each other in a very obvious, cliched way. And it's, as you said, it's lovely that I can relate to her and feel rather protective of her, and then also realize in the recent episodes we've made that she's becoming a woman, and that perhaps she doesn't need my protection in the same way. But to see the warmth between us, I think, is really nice, or to feel it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I love about it. It's one of the highlights. And then obviously as Hayley grows and learns, she obviously doesn't need the protector. She just needs a friend. And she gets to spar with Deborah Monk's character, who is really mean to her to begin with, because she's obviously in Overwest as well, and you have that competition. So there's a lot going on between all of the characters, apart from, you know, Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays the maestro, and he is also nominated, by the way, for a Golden Globe. That would have been terribly exciting for you guys as well, just having that second nomination. What's your highlight from the show to date? My favorite episode is the rehearsal where the orchestra is playing on the street. Such an amazing episode. Really, really highly recommended. Do you have a particular highlight to date so far?
I love that episode from season 1, because what happened in that episode sort of echoed the life around us. Of course, you know, you're playing in the streets in New York in an abandoned lot, and everything that was written sort of just happened. Everyone, you know, who lived in that neighborhood in East Village came and joined us and enjoyed the music and played with us. It was pretty fantastic. In this season, there's many highlights for me. I mean, we go to Mexico City and play there, and we play in the Palacio de Bellas Artes. And we were really lucky because, you know, you're in this environment, you're there with Gael, who's a local, so you have, you know, you feel like you have this sort of fantastic access to this world, and you don't feel so much like a tourist. And then there's Diego Rivera's paintings everywhere, and then we play in front of this audience. And it happened to be the last night, that night of the whole shoot for myself and Lola Kirk. So when we wrapped, Roman Coppola was directing that episode, and he said, you know, he told the audience, you know, these 2 actresses have just completed their work on this season, and everyone applauded. It was very, very heartwarming, and Gael translated it all for the audience. So we got to stand on the stage of the Bellas Artes and take a bow.
Oh my God!
I realized I've never wrapped a film or a show in that way before. It was quite special.
Yeah.
You know, but there's just been so many interesting moments because we've traveled, and I think the season's just got bigger and larger and more adventure filled. So, you know, Gretchen Mol guest stars in this season, and I have some fantastic stuff to do with her. She's really great at it. Dermot Mulrooney shows up and plays some fantastic cello, and so yeah, there's a lot of highlights. And then all these classical musicians are in our show. Lang Lang, and there's a whole scene. You've probably seen what I'm referring to, so I won't give too much. But yeah.
Wow. See, not for nothing, even if the show doesn't win a bucket load of awards, the experiences that you guys get to have on the show would be reward in itself. And for us viewers, we get to immerse ourselves into this world that we never normally would have even thought about. So that's pretty exciting.
Thank you. What's nice, I suppose, is that it demystifies a lot of it, because I, like you, I didn't really know much about it at all, and I would have thought there was a stuffiness and a sort of inaccessibility to it. And I think we obviously just explore people's lives. They're just human beings who are living in a certain context, you know, and doing something they're passionate about. But I guess like a lot of athletes or anyone with a career where they've had to sort of really hothouse and study hard from a young age and just focus on that one thing, there's a payoff. You know, there's a moment where people need a release, and whether that's through, you know, a vice of some kind or whatever their life kind of needs at that moment. I think it's there's a lot to explore. Yeah.
Veering off the show for a minute, because I ask this question a lot. This is really apt for anybody, not just actors, but because we all think back to our first job, or you know, when we were very young and we were starting out in whatever profession we choose. Your film debut was in one of my favorite films of all time, In the Name of the Father, and I'm wondering if you can take us back to that time. It was a while ago now. I think it was 1993. It came out. What would you say to yourself back then, given all the experience that you've had now over the last few years?
Well, I was going to say relax, but maybe that's not good advice. Maybe that's not good advice at all, because maybe a bit of tension and nerves isn't a bad thing. You know, the feeling of the adrenaline and the you can't believe you're there. I had all those feelings, of course. And Jim Sheridan is an incredible man, and he's fantastic to work with, and he, you know, encourages a lot of improvisation. And it was a very small role I had in that film, but I was incredibly excited to be there. And yeah, I remember just being incredibly excited. And I remember one journey to work one morning with a bunch of actors in a van being driven to the set. And I think I was talking 10 to the dozen about the sky and Dublin and the landscape. And this actress said, Christ, you know, she rolled her eyes. She was more seasoned than me. And, but, you know, in one way, that level of excitement you feel and that degree of whatever it is that's not relaxation is probably a very healthy thing. I remember just, you know, just loving every moment of it. And that's a pretty good memory to have.
Yeah, absolutely. It could have been a horrible disaster. So, you know, that's good. Let's leave it at that. You know, and since that time, you've obviously worked extensively in film, on stage, on television, in Europe, in the States. You were on network TV for a while, on, you know, Boston Legal and shows of that caliber. And now you're on a show on Amazon, which is like, you know, 10 years ago, no one would have even thought that would have been possible. What do you say are the major differences between working in the different mediums for actors? And do you have a particular favorite?
It's interesting, because I would have thought in the past that you would, you know, the definition of the delineation between the mediums would probably be theatre and film. Those would have been my two notions of what the worlds were, and they were obviously different in some profound ways. But now I realize in the end, it's mainly just about who you're with, and whether you're with them in a room with a camera or on a stage. It's really about whether the writing compels you and draws you in, and whether the people around you make you feel alive in a certain way, and hopefully you do them. You know, hopefully you can awaken something in each other, whether it's the actors in a or two people standing on a stage in a small pub theatre. So I think there's a lot of emphasis put on the medium, but for me, and for probably most actors I know, it's about the joy of the language, the specific chemistry of the language and the people and whoever's directing you. And that, you know, that triumvirate of those elements, I think it's pretty special. And so when that comes together, it probably doesn't really matter what the medium is. Is that a funny answer?
No, it makes sense. It's as long as you're doing good work, it really doesn't matter whether you're on the stage or you're you know, you're on the CW or you're on you know, a film, you're playing in a theatre. Who cares?
That's to the degree that obviously there's nothing like doing a play and having a fantastic audience experience,
Right.
where you come away feeling like you've fed off each other in a certain way, and then you have a talk in the bar afterwards with someone who's just watched it. That's a special kind of evening. And I remember being a kid, I was lucky because my mum took me to the theatre a lot, and that's how I discovered drama. And that specific sensation of watching those people on stage, I remember thinking, God, people do this for a job. That's hard to believe. But now I think things have become quite free on film sets in a way, and there's certainly a freedom in the way we shoot Mozart. There's a great deal of improvisation, and people come to work with a spring in their step because it's such a lovely subject to explore. Yeah.
And then after the show streams, people tweet you and tell you whether they hated your performance or loved it, and it's very, very in your face, I assume, now with social media.
Yeah, it's been kind so far, so
that's good.
Onwards and
That's
upwards.
good to hear. Thank God for that. Well, Mozart in the Jungle premieres today on Amazon, so people who aren't familiar with the show should really get into it before the Golden Globes on the 10th of January, because it may win, and then you can say that you knew that all along. Thank you so much, Saffron, for your time today, and good luck to the show, and we look forward to seeing the second season.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely talking to you.